Da pacem Domine in dierus nostris.
Cobra la 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 la.
And with the sound of the banging of the Holy Starter, that welcomes you to the 28th podcast, where I, your host Gary, discuss my world of G.I. Joe. Whether it's release news, new additions to my collection, comics, or just experiencing G.I. Joe in pop culture, this is the Chaplain's Assistance Motor Pod. And at the end, we take a closer look at a vehicle or playset from anywhere in the Hasbro G.I. Joe toy line. Right now, I'm broadcasting from a secret tomb in Europe where there's viable DNA from long-deceased Roman Emperor Augustus Caesar. There's been sightings of a mad scientist belonging to terrorist organizations determined to rule the world. If all goes well, and you listen to the end, that might be a hint to what I'm leading to. It is July, and after Yo-Jo June, I talk about Cobra because it is Cobra Convergence season, and this year marks Cobra Convergence 6. So with a heavy emphasis on Cobra, let's get started. Big news going on right now in the world of G.I. Joe is Haslab has done their G.I. Joe classified vehicle, the Cobra HISS. And earlier today, it was announced the 4th stretch goal tier for backers on this. And to begin with, this has been a hugely successful Haslab. I think it caught even the team at Hasbro sleeping, just because they haven't been rolling out the stretch goal tiers as fast as the tiers have been funding. We started off with a modern interpretation of the classic 1983 HISS with obviously the upscaling to a 1/12 scale and adding lights and details. I was mostly sold on it until they opened up the back and showed a troop area for storage of a troop. So the HISS, in its base form, carries 3 figures. And that's pretty cool. You don't get the rear bumper for your classified figure to stand on, at least not that I saw. I could probably stand and take another closer look at it. But the initial offering was a little more modern, and the canopy had some framing around the glass, so it really gave it a realistic feel to it. The base comes with more detail around the treads. The treads aren't one solid piece of plastic. They go around. They're not on the dumbbells anymore. While mostly staying true to the 1983 aesthetic, they did add a lot of detail to it to make it that classified toy. Now, and I use the term toy loosely because it really is an adult collectible, because that is what Haslab really is geared towards. These are centerpieces for collections, where some people might be like, they're not making a toy. How do they expect to get kids involved? Haslab isn't designed with children in mind. It is designed to get the collector dollar, the high-end piece. So while having a toy HISS for kids to play with is an argument, the Haslab branch of Hasbro isn't the place where you're going to find any real toys. I have supported 3 Haslabs so far. The Razor Crest from Star Wars, which I absolutely adore. But again, I agree it's not a toy. It is a centerpiece for my Mandalorian figures. And I got the Sky Striker eventually. That'll come in sometime. And then now I've decided to back the HISS as well. I was going to buy 1 or 2 because of my friend. didn't know he's been incommunicado over in Europe for reasons pertaining to the ongoing conflict in Russia and Ukraine. So I was hedging my bets anyway for him. And then that third seat really just was okay, this is adding a presence to the toy that I wasn't expecting. Now, I'll quickly talk about some of the unlocks. The first thing, 8,000 backers in a week. It was blown through in a 24-hour period. So now we get an extra HISS driver. That's right, the HISS does come with a driver. Now we're getting a HISS Tactician, which is the HISS driver mold, in an alternate color palette from one of the color studies from Ron Rudat. And anybody that was wondering what those may look at, Hasbro Pulse has posted them, but also Joe Declassified on Facebook, Dan Klingensmith. He has the Creating G.I. Joe books. He also posted those as well. So even before Hasbro Pulse posted it, he had already posted that up across social media within minutes of the stream ending, maybe even during the stream. That's pretty cool. So now you're up to 2 figures. You still have that and it's a $300 price point. The first unlock was some missiles that hang off the sides. Not really, not something that I'm like excited about. And then the second unlock was a retro canopy, which is essentially just a molded piece of plastic, no framing, and also replacing essentially the armor around the treads with something flatter, reminiscent of the 83. So it was like it's kind of downgrading the HISS from a classified HISS to a very retro upscaled HISS. And that didn't get me excited either. But the third tier was essentially a female HISS driver called the HISS Gunner. And she also comes with additional machine guns to mount on the HISS. And oh my gosh, that I'm really excited about that. That is, now we're starting to get value at that price point. And then earlier today, they announced the fourth tier, which is they're calling it a misprint Cobra Commander, but the colloquialism or the euphemism that we all use in the G.I. Joe hobby is called the Mickey Mouse. So we're going to get a Mickey Mouse Cobra Commander if it reaches tier 4, which is 16,000 backers. So I haven't checked on it, but we were over 14,000. So this is really exciting. 4 figures. The price point on those right now on retail is $22.99. So you're about almost $100 for 4 figures, and then you still have another $200 for the HISS, plus all the add-ons, which seems to be reasonably in line for a classified product, even if it was on a retail scale, because vehicles do cost tooling and they do cost money. So I'm really happy right now, especially if it gets a tier 4. But even with tier 3 right now, it is an okay value for the dollar. I'm not trying to sell anybody on that. I'm getting at least one for myself. Haven't decided how many I really want. It's probably going to be either 1 or 2 for myself, just because I really want to open it up, because this thing's going to be huge. And part of that in displaying a classified size HISS is me creating room in my house. And I've been working at my house, moving some of my G.I. Joe stuff all around the basement, moving some G.I. Joe stuff upstairs into my room. And the big thing is I came up with a new display solution in my bedroom just for my stuff. I'm moving some things around there, so I'm going to have a lot more room, because every so often, I take G.I. Joe figures out for whatever reason, just to play with them or, manipulate them, or just what am I going to talk about on the podcast? And they find their way upstairs, and then they don't go back downstairs. And I add them to my little Camp Jellystone diorama, and it's getting really crowded. I probably have about 20 figures now with some small play sets and vehicles. It's getting crowded, and I got to go to IKEA, buy a Calyx, build it with the stick figure men, and get some things going on there. Be really cool to have something upstairs to look at besides the major reorganization my wife and I have been doing in the basement, which has been taking longer than expected. But a guy's got a podcast and tend to his family and go to work 6 days a week. So, like anything else, life takes time. Going back to the classified line, this past couple weeks, I have gotten mail calls galore, and just everything has been released or I've been shopping. But classified itself, aside from today's announcement or today's release on Hasbro Pulse of the Tiger Force Duke and Rams Cycle, again, I pre-ordered, but I'm finally catching up on the classified releases. I was able to finally get a couple bats, a couple alley vipers. My Crocmaster came in. The Storm Shadow Spirit came into this afternoon, and I got my 2 Cobra officers. I'm building up my classified figure collection, and the one thing was I was kind of getting tired of the classified line. It is, my biggest criticism after the first wave is going back to the 1980s, not moving the brand forward so much with more current looks, just modest updates of the 1980s designs. However, the big one when I got it in was number 38 was Crocmaster. I showed my wife Crocmaster at least twice. I showed him to my son. I showed him to my dad when he came over for July 4th. There's just something about that guy that he has a presence to him in 6-inch form that is kind of there in the 3 3/4. But the 3 3/4 figure is kind of chunky. But the 6-inch figure looks big and muscular. And Fiona the Croc, she's no slouch. An articulated crocodile, that's just nuts. But it's just like, and it kind of got me excited again for classified. It's just like, okay, this stuff is awesome. And it's part of the reason why I'm buying a new display, because I wanted to start taking these classified figures back out of the packages. I haven't taken one out since I got Barbecue, and that's been, 6 months. Breaker's never been out of the package. All the others have, all the other newer ones. And it's not that I don't like them. I don't know. It's just like, I wasn't getting that same excitement from the sculpts. And then Crocmaster hit, and then the HISS classified Haslab. It's just like, all of a sudden I'm getting motored and energized again about the classified line. So that's good. I'm glad the brain is getting me excited again. Without retreading criticisms, it is a good time to be a G.I. Joe collector, especially in that big scale. But to go back to the small scale, I did get the Cobra Trooper and Cobra Officer O-ring figures. And I'm going to try to do an unboxing video for those and get that up on YouTube. That seems to be an easy way for me to get content out there on the YouTubes, because I'm not doing the podcast anymore. I don't know if that's a mistake or not. I'm sure somebody will chime in. The biggest criticism that I've seen online so far is the officer's legs are molded wrong. So that's something I'm going to have to take a look at when I open it up. I'm excited to finally get them. I just really want to open them up. Just, again, life has just been preventing me from really getting into the new stuff from Hasbro. But going backwards into more older stuff, on G.I. Joeberg, Steve talked about Bulletproof from 1992. And he mentioned he had a mic, and I'm like, okay, well, how bad could it be to get a Bulletproof with a mic? And I'm here to say 90s figures with small accessories, they're up there in price. Bulletproof cost me about $50 shipped, complete. I didn't want to screw around piecing them together, especially because of that mic. And, then of course I'm looking at other ones like 1994 Lifeline, $80, $90 for that. And I'm like, no, especially because I'm an opener or I want them complete and open. It's like, it's a 1994 figure. We're not talking about 1987 sneak peek, which you'll buy complete just for the microphone to put them in your 1988 Night Force sneak peek. Not that I've done that. But so Bulletproof was pretty cool. And then the other thing was, and I didn't know about him or even Headman because they were a flashing, not only was it a spring-loaded gun, but it also had lights and batteries in it. So, all right, I'm a sucker for a gimmick. I'm a sucker for a toy being a toy while being an awesome action figure. And I put new batteries in it, and the light just barely glows. And it's just like, wah, wah. And it's just sad trombone. And I was just like, so of course I tested, I replaced the batteries in the Headman, and I got the same thing there. I've had the Headman for a while, so. But then moving on, I bought version 4 of Viper from 1994 with a little 3-figure lot. He came with a couple other figures that I already had. And then I hunted down a Dark Lawn Vader because I thought I was going to review that sometime soon. And because mine was missing the missiles. And I probably have the missiles. I just didn't want to look for them. Shame on me. And then finally, the diamond in the rough was my usual search, my usual multiple times daily search of G.I. Joe, just that term in Mercari, turned up a 2004 KB Toys Crimson Sabotage partial set, so it comes with I was able to secure the ASP and all 3 Crimson Guardsmen. And the Crimson Guardsmen have removable helmets, which is pretty cool. There's one African-American or person figure, and then the other 2 Caucasian. So, you got some representation there in the Crimson Guard Corps. And, the all-wheeled pump-action shotguns with foldable stocks. That was a really cool get. So I'm still missing the HISS, but it's a red HISS. So my Sears SMS HISS probably would be good substitute. But that 2004 era, they started experimenting with like dry washes and stuff to give it like a dirty effect. I don't know. The HISS seems to be pretty attainable if I decide to search for it again. But it's really cool to have a different version of an ASP. It means I don't need to have so many regular ASPs. I can build out my ASP army with the different variations and releases. And that's what I did for new stuff. There's a lot of new stuff. And I'm hoping that there's no comic book releases so I can actually open some of them up and play with them and talk about them more on the next episode of the Chaplain's Assistance Motor Pod, because I have a comic book still to talk about. It is the latest from Larry Hama and IDW Publishing. It is G.I. Joe 294. I managed to get all 3 covers. The A of Freddie Williams, the B by S.L. Gallant, and the retailer incentive cover of Sherlock by John Royal. Now, last time I did enjoy the Freddie Williams Serpentor so much. And this time, cover A by Freddie Williams has Destro and Zorana like superimposed on the background with the Joe team down. And of course, this is the 4th part of the 5-part thing. So these guys are heading stage right towards Serpentor. And it's in that Freddie Williams style. And it's a good painting-esque cover. However, it isn't really representative of what's in the issue, so that knocks it down a bunch in my opinion. Now, the S.L. Gallant's cover with Dawn Moreno standing on a floor with, the Arashikage symbol. She's standing, and then in the reflection of the floor is Snake Eyes in his version 2 getup. That is indicative of the ghost of Snake Eyes that's haunting Dawn. his personality that was implanted by the brainwave scanner way back in G.I. Joe 226 or so. It's a good image. It's sort of evokes what's going on in the issue, but not really. More of just, oh, okay, this is what's going on in the story again. And then finally you have, again, John Royal. He is a great pinup artist. I did enjoy, when he did the interiors, but he's moved away from interiors for some health reasons with his hands. So that's a shame. He was a good. I really enjoyed his art interiors. But, Sherlock has never looked better on that cover. But, again, if I only had to pick one cover, I'd get cover B by S.L. Gallant. And but it wasn't really a strong month for covers this month or bi-weekly. Another note, too, it is G.I. Joe 294. It was released in June, and here we are in July. So we have 6 months left in 2022 and 6 issues of G.I. Joe for 2022. So will 300 come out in December? It looks like they might be able to do it. So good job on the editorial team for trying to get this book back on track on schedule. So thank you, Tom Waltz. Speaking of the editor, Tom Waltz, we have writer Larry Hama, artist S.L. Gallant, inks are by Maria Keene, Jay Brown on colors, Neil Uyetake on lettering, and, of course, research specialist Diana Davis. Again, the creative team is staying the same, so the book is going to probably be on a solid path moving forward. Now, we open up to a wonderful splash page by S.L. Gallant. I really enjoy the Super Casino Battle Bat attacking Helix and Dawn, and very great way to get us in the action again. We got the fire coming out of the bat's mouth, the blades coming out of the arms and hands. So, the armor on the legs, it is grotesque, but cool. I really like what they did here, what Larry and S.L. Gallant came up with. In the next couple pages are just the battle, and it's really done well. The layouts are good. It is just solid artwork. And you get 4 pages of that. So now, remembering that G.I. Joe is a 20-page book, so we got 16 more pages left to the story. This is where 40 years ago, 50 years ago, fights didn't always take this long. The fights were always a lot shorter. But what we're doing there and what Larry's doing now is he's trying to establish that these bats aren't an easy knockdown, especially for Dawn and Helix, who aren't using firearms. So they are at an easy disadvantage, so they have to use their resources around them. So they escape, they defeat the bat, and they move on. They stumble across the bat building area where they're making more of these casino dealers. Them going through, trying to talk their way out of it, not trying to bring attention to themselves. But, of course, Blue Ninja, Alpha 001, he knows what's going on, gives the order on site, and they walk away temporarily. They're going to hide on the floor. By being in a public place, they think they're going to be safer. And the book basically moves forward. There's actually that opening action sequence was really cool. I really enjoyed it. But again, they're padding out the story a little bit because this could be done quicker. But they're trying to create an event for the closure of this book. So I appreciate what they're trying to do without trying to make this story bogged down. But it could have gone either way. I mean, you can do either way with Larry Hama. I mean, he's definitely got the chops. We get a little quick recap of Serpentor turning into Genghis Khan. That kind of, to me, still, I'm not thrilled about that idea. I really think my inner headcanon of Serpentor always will be that intermingling of personalities through the DNA memories, which we all know that's science fantasy. And then we check back in with the other Joes, Roadblock, Rock and Roll, and Gung Ho, and then Scarlet and Snake Eyes. So there's a lot of moving parts. It's moving part, and Larry is splitting the pages up and leaving, the little hangers that make you turn the page. He's doing it well. And he's also showing how Dawn and Helix have learned from that first encounter. So their second encounter is easier. And then they're going into a worse encounter where there's a whole bunch of them. And then they're outmatched until Scarlet and Snake Eyes join the fray. So that's really nice with a good buildup of creating conflict that escalates throughout the issue. And of course, we close out with Mindbender's discovery that, hey, Snake Eyes is in the casino. So Laura 343, who's been here all this time, is like, hey, you can go catch him now. And now we can have our little Snake Eyes army for Cobra. And that's where we leave off. Sorry for all those spoilers. I should have told you in advance. But this is just a really solid book. This is something that this book I enjoyed as much as like 291, where 292 and 293 were a little bit of those chess moving setup issues. And this book being a little explosion of action. So it was really good to read this book. This was a really solid read for me. Still looking forward to the last 6 issues for this series. Speaking of Serpentor, this episode, the 28th episode of the Chaplain's Assistant Motorbud, we are going to talk about Serpentor's Air Chariot. And it doesn't get much more Cobra than Serpentor, the creation of Dr. Mindbender. But of course, Dr. Mindbender had to build Serpentor a wonderful air chariot with gold reminiscent of the splendor of riches and all the practicality of nothing. So let's dive in. And in 1986, Hasbro, after, releasing a Halo in 1985 with the Flag, which was built upon the extravagant 1984 Whale of what can you do bigger and better. In 1986, they're telling this huge story. G.I. Joe's just huge on Sunbow. It's huge in the comics. What do you do more? And they come up with the Cobra Emperor Serpentor. And Serpentor, in my opinion, is more of a deluxe figure like Zartan was from 1984. Now, in 1984, Zartan was on the back of card backs, even though he was a boxed vehicle character. In 1986, you kind of got the same thing with Serpentor, although he wasn't on the card backs for all the individually packaged figures. So he's technically a vehicle driver. But because of what we'll get into with the Air Chariot, I don't think it qualifies more than like an extreme value vehicle in that same vein that Zartan's Swamp Skier was. Let's start with Serpentor. Serpentor is a wonderfully sculpted gold plastic action figure. There is a big variation of Serpentor called the yellow neck. And I've never had a yellow neck. I have only seen pictures on the internet, so I cannot speak to the yellow neck variant other than the fact that it's really expensive if you have one or if you're looking to obtain one. His head has the cowl that was molded and then glued around his head. So if the cowl falls off, his head looks something like a misshapen cone head. So think Dan Aykroyd, but somebody smashed his cone. That's what Serpentor kind of looks like under the cowl. The cowl is shaped like a snake's head with fangs that go down in front of Serpentor's eyes. Must be great for vision. Kind of a little bit, painted black. It's an emo vibe. And you have the fangs going up in front of his mouth. So that must be helpful for eating. You got black eyes for the snake's eyes, and Serpentor has black eyebrows and black eyes as well. You move down to his torso. Again, you got molded in gold with scales, and across the chest and belly, a strip of yellow, like the belly of a snake. There might be a theme going on here. Might be hitting it pretty hard, but let's go with it. It was the 1980s, and you have green piping, which would be like snakes. And they even have little snake heads over his shoulders for where the epaulets would be. You move down to his waist piece. Again, you got more gold scalies. You got the yellow belly extending all the way down to the bottom of the waist piece, the crotch. And then you have a green snake-like belt across the front, with the head being a belt buckle. And it looks to be an open head, an open mouth, but they painted the center of the mouth yellow. So if I was to have a little bit of a beater Serpentor, maybe I'd paint that red, just to give it a little more definition there. Let's see, you got gold legs with green armor on it. Again, the legs have the scaling. His legs don't have any daggers or guns on them. And you get down to his shin guards are essentially gold, again with green crosses around that for tying it up against his leg. And then finally, the base of his feet are green. Now, let's talk about his arms. Both arms are, again, molded in gold, and he has green gauntlets that look like a snake. And again, you have the snake's upper fangs going across his index and pinky finger, and the hand is painted yellow. Now, on his right hand only, he does have a silver wrist device. That is great, so he does have, hands-free calling. Overall, this is a pretty cool figure. His first main accessories is you have this golden shield that fits in like a backpack, and it goes above his head, so that creates the cobra's gills, like when they expand when it's trying to intimidate its prey. And it doesn't really do much more than that, other than give more of a regal appearance. And then you have his green cape. And I do appreciate today, more than ever, having soft goods intermixed with these action figures. It is something that can elevate an action figure to a different level. My favorite example is Dusty from 1985. I had a lot of love for him, and also his Tiger Force brethren from 1988. Because, again, that soft goods just adds an extra touch. And with Serpentor, with the full cape, it's green, and it is sparkly. And that is great because, all that glitters isn't gold. Sometimes it is emerald. It is nice that you have this wonderful motif going on with this guy. He's just really cool. There's no doubting that he is the Emperor. Now, his other accessories is he also came with a rubber snake molded in a shade of gold. Now, I have plenty of these snakes. No two seem to be alike. Some of them are as bright gold as the Air Chariot. Others can be as dark as almost a brown gold. There's a lot of variations. Some of the variation might be age-related. Some of it might just be mold, whatever was in the mix when they poured it in the mold. And it's a solid color. It's solid, no paint apps. It's a nice snake for him to have. Everybody needs a pet snake. And then his last little accessory is a silver dagger, which has some nice detailing on the hilt and the handle. So it looks really nice and it works well. And I think about one of his personalities being Caesar and, et tu, Brute. It is just a nice little it's a simple weapon for him, but it has significance, especially from somebody that's cloned or created from the combined DNA of histories most legendary leaders. And real quick to touch back on that cape, I forgot to mention the arms for the cape are the armholes for the cape are commonly ripped. It is a tight fit across his back. So if you're looking for a Serpentor, this cape is being intact is also something that's relatively hard to find. His dagger is sometimes hard to find. The snake's not so much. The fangs are commonly broken on the head, and he's made of gold plastic. And sometimes gold plastic has that thing called gold plastic syndrome, where that metallic plastic just doesn't hold up well, and it is prone to breaking. So unfortunately, that is something to consider as well. But if you find him in good condition, I like him. Hopefully me gushing over Serpentor can carry over into the Air Chariot. The Air Chariot is molded in two colors, gold and black. So it's a very simple toy. I like the fact that they call it a chariot. It makes me think again of Rome. I'm definitely picking up that vibe. And to start off with, it's combination of like a jet and a hovercraft. In the front, you have air intakes on the wings and in the center of the Air Chariot. The wings are there. They look like they could provide lift. The belly of the Air Chariot, has minor panels, very smooth, no riveting or anything. The Cobra symbols on the sticker are wonderful because they have little crowns on them. That is perfect. It is just so obvious what Hasbro's trying to tell you about Serpentor that it doesn't leave much room for the imagination. Air inlet in the front passes through to the back where you have the exhaust for the thrust. And then furthering down the bottom, you have a little knob which turns the fan, which obviously is another way that Serpentor's Air Chariot is getting its lift. And then further behind that is you have little tail fin going down. That is great for holding this, for playing with it. That little tail gives you a nice area for your fingers to pinch. And if your Air Chariot's working good, you can even spin the fan with one finger. Now the fan is molded in black, and you really don't get too much definition from the bottom. So moving to the wings, again, you have the two engines over each wing. The wings aren't long, so it is kind of stubby, and they do go back to two tail fins, and they're just in there. So there you go. You got your rudders for steering the Air Chariot if you were to fly it. And now you go on the top, and it's hard not to notice the snake head in the front for the fairing. So Serpentor's standing on the chariot, much like, again, Chariots of Rome. And, he does have handlebars for him to steer. And I didn't know this about this till I got one, was that when you steer the Air Chariot, the little snake head in the front, and the snake head looks like the Cobra symbol with its mouth closed. When you steer it, the head moves left to right. So you want to go right, the head's going to turn right. Turn left, the head's going to turn left. If there needed to be lights on the Air Chariot, you could put lights in the snake's eyes. One area I'm going to immediately point out is a little bit of a loss. I know the size of this doesn't leave much room for engineering, but how cool it would be if the mouth opened on the snake head. The Air Chariot is put together a lot with pegs into a friction fit of a socket, and sometimes these sockets don't stick. I have a couple Air Chariots, and my sockets have a very hard sticking to the pegs. So even my good one, the wings are separating, and on my other Air Chariot, the bottom of the snake head won't stick on. The other thing I found with my other Air Chariot, not with my primary one, is the Cobra fairing has two clips it snaps on. Those are broken. Again, it's golden plastic, so gold plastic syndrome. that does apply. We have 2 guns that are on either side of the snake, and they pivot left to right. That's pretty cool. So Serpentor does have a means of offense while riding this. He can be an offensive leader. He can be in the battle. Finally, on the back, we have some sticker detail with dials and stuff, with gauges. So it looks realistic, as realistic as in Serpentor's Air Chariot can look. It fits the part. And then the fan, the turbo fan on the top, that is, it's about the size, a little larger than a quarter, a U.S. quarter. It's black and it's functional, right? So now to talk about the practicality of the Air Chariot versus the toyetics. Now, as a toy, it's awesome. As a 6-year-old, I actually tried to get one of these. I went to Pelton's in Middletown, and it was one of their sidewalk sales, and they had everything on clearance inside, whatever. And I went in and I'm like, Mommy, let's get the Serpentor's thing. And we get it, we bring it home. And Serpentor was missing, and not even all the parts for the Air Chariot were in the box, and had to return it. I remember that. It was something I wanted. Serpentor was the big bad in the cartoon series. I was 6, and this was about 1987, so I was still riding that high of the 1986 season and of G.I. Joe, the movie. And so it was kind of a bummer. And that was my brushing with it. Because it is, as a toy, as a kid, I could see myself playing with this. It is great. You have a single foot peg for Serpentor's, if he's flying it, it's for his left foot, his left heel. As a toy, it's cool. It plays well. It elevates him. This chariot elevates the figure. But practically, bringing my 40 plus year sensibility into this, there's no way in heck this thing would ever fly. If Serpentor was standing on the Air Chariot, his back is right behind the fan. Now, that fan, if that's providing lift, it has to create a low pressure front on top of it to create a high pressure front below it. Layman's terms, it's going to suck it through the top and blow out the bottom. If you're standing on top of the turbofan, it's going to suck you through it. If you have a cape, it is going to try to suck that cape through the engine fan. It makes no sense from a safety standpoint to have this. Even if you have it properly graded to prevent you from sucking in a person, probably still not a good idea. The wings are stubby. The engines, you don't have a lot of room for fuel or ammo. From a practical standpoint, it isn't that practical. Serpentor really needs to be like that issue of G.I. Joe, the Marvel series from the Cobra Civil War. He was on a HISS tank, and that is, if you took a HISS tank and gold plated it with green highlights, that might be something more befitting of him, while still maintaining being practical, a practical application for Serpentor. But we're talking about putting adult sensibilities onto a kid's toy. And as a kid's toy, I really think this thing is awesome. I really think the Serpentor figure is top tier. I guested on The Pint last year, and we did our top 10 action figures from pre-1990. And Serpentor was number 3 for me. He was just somebody that gives you that big bad in a toy line. I think there's enough going on in there. It makes him interesting and kind of dangerous. I mean, come on. The guy's practically dripping with venom from all the fangs on his outfit. Only reason why the Air Chariot suffers is because it is not a practical vehicle from an adult standpoint, but from a toy standpoint, I loved it. And he's kind of a must-own figure, and as a must-own figure, he's kind of a deluxe figure, so it's kind of a must-own vehicle. So on a scale of 0 to 5 snake bites, 5 being an absolute must-own, using quarter bite scales, because you do have 4 fangs, if they're all not broken, this is like, for me, a 4.5, a solid 4.5 snake bites out of 5. I believe if you collect G.I. Joe O-Ring, you got to have a Serpentor, and you got to have the Air Chariot with Serpentor. The only time you're not going to want this, in my opinion, is if you don't want Serpentor. It is. It's just absolutely awesome. I love it. And I want everybody to have a Serpentor that's not broken and awesome. And then they could have this wonderful small Air Chariot, which elevates the figure to the next level. So there you have it. Before I'm discovered by sentient animatronic casino android workers, I'd like to tell you about a giveaway I'm going to do, my first ever giveaway here on the Chaplain's Assistance Motor Pod, and that is a G.I. Joe Classified Series number 7 Gung Ho. And I'd like to give it away to you listeners, and it's going to be really easy to take part in. All you have to do is find me on social media, and that is at Chaplain Joe Pod on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or just search Chaplain's Assistance Motor Pod and look for the official tweet for this podcast. It will probably have Serpentor and the Air Chariot on it. So I like to do the action figure photography, and I'm going to try to get it done during the edit of this episode. And all you have to do is reply again with the hashtag G.I. Joe Prisoner Transport, wherever you find that. You don't have to follow me. All you have to do is respond. And if you aren't on social media, then all you can do is send me an email to chaplainjoepod@gmail.com. And just in the body of the message, hashtag G.I. Joe Prisoner Transport. There you have it. Hopefully somebody wants to win him. I will hold a random drawing Facebook Live. I will do that at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, July 22nd. Hope to see a lot of people interacting with the podcast at that. Be excited to send it out to someone that would be more than happy to have it, some lucky listener. Well, I gotta go. The casino androids seem to be looking for something right now, so I better make myself scarce. This has been the Chaplain's Assistance Motor Pod, the strange but not estranged nerdy little brother of The Pint, a pop culture podcast, also a repository of viable DNA for your cloning needs. You can find them on social media at The Pint Podcast. You can find this podcast on all your favorite podcatchers like Anchor.fm, our host, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and Good Pods. And while you're at it, please leave a review or even share with your friends, as it only helps grow and improve the Motor Pod. Just before they catch me, one final missile for the masses. Be decent to each other. See ya.